Well, welcome, Nikki, to the podcast. I've been very excited to interview you. We are going to take an entire, almost an hour talking about muscles and protein and strength training and all of the things that we as women in our age bracket and, I shouldn't say in our age bracket, all women should be doing, but a lot of us just are in a space where maybe we haven't ever started strength training, or we just don't know how to do it. We don't want to injure ourselves. So I think this topic is so important. And even though we usually talk more about blood sugar regulation and insulin resistance, it all starts in the muscle. So we're super excited to have you here today. So introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Amazing. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here and to just share more knowledge in this field of macros, muscles, all of the things, strength training. And I know your podcast is heavily related to the blood sugar, which is so important too, as well. Like you said, it all marries together. So a little bit about me. Back before I started my fitness journey, keep it short, but I was into sports, played field hockey, basketball, and track, came from, the team atmosphere, the practice at this time, and post high school, in the middle of to college, trying to figure out your life, I should say, at 25, in my early 20s, I really struggled with my body image, and just I wanted to be that fit and healthy person that I was when I was in sports, but I didn't know where to start. And I feel like a lot of women resonate with that. Like you had said, first starting out in strength training or first knowing how to eat right. And I personally just was uncomfortable with the way I looked. I always hid behind baggy clothes, never wore shorts. I was so insecure about my legs. And I tried various diets, and I hit the gym sporadically within the early 20s, but I just couldn't keep anything consistent or give it enough time to really allow me to see results. And then in 2015, I was, and I'm sure many can resonate with it, especially with the new year coming up, but I was a New Year's resolution, and I was set out to be this is my year. I want to transform my body. I want to boost my confidence. And unlike any years, the years before, I was I'm determined to make this happen. And I'm determined to stop feeling bad about myself. So I was very challenged at first. I was overwhelmed by the different methods, the advice on the internet. And I kept, Googling, where can I find protein? What is protein made up of? And so just that learning curve at the beginning, but the real change happened when I actually dove into, and everybody's journey is different, but this is how mine started. I dove into the world of bodybuilding. I saw Instagram posts. I saw the physiques that inspired me, and I was like, oh, if they can do it, then I can do it. And, I started to compete. My first competition was at the end of 2015. So I hired a coach. I dedicated myself fully to the plan, became immersed in strength training while I was in my last years of nursing school and taking care of my sick grandmother and working part-time in a hospital. And, months of that hard work, I did become pro with a very small federation, but this definitely ignited my passion with strength training and nutrition. But that high was almost very short-lived, because I achieved a goal, but at that point I lacked knowing what to do next. And I quickly gained 25 pounds back in 1 month. And it was the worst that I had ever felt. So I definitely have been on the spectrum of yo-yo dieting, right? And I was like, oh, this is the only way that I know how to get these results. I need to compete again. So I went into a larger federation and became pro with the OCB, and then, and won that show, and then was preparing for my pro debut 2 years later, and fell into this 2-year cycle of weight loss, weight gain, weight loss, weight gain. And then I started to compete or to train for my pro debut, and ended up in the hospital 2 times because of my extreme with this world. So once my pro debut was over, I won, I beat the pros. I left the bodybuilding world undefeated. It's a cool accomplishment, but it was too extreme for me. And at the end, I was like, peace out. I'm done with this world. I need to understand more sustainability and more realistic way of living and a more balanced approach. So that's where I led into macronutrients and more, less is more, and learning about that world. And it's a little bit about my journey, how it started, not knowing much, being very curious and learning along my way, and then just never stop learning like how to make this a more balanced approach for myself. And so now I can say that I truly live in like balance. And it's so nice because I went from one extreme to another. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Yeah, so many of us have that pain to purpose where you want to feel good. You want to do what's right for your body, but it takes some time, and sometimes you got to kind of just fall fall a lot of times and keep picking yourself back up until you find what actually works for you. And sometimes you do some really unhealthy things before you figure out what's healthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a journey, but I'm sure your story resonates with a lot of people, and it's like you can get so extreme. And I know I had a similar story with nutrition. It's like I got to the point where I had excluded so many foods and was unhealthy. And that's basically why I went into dietetics and was like borderline eating disorder. And, you just recover from that. And then you get to teach people what you know, which is where you're at now. So we're really excited about that. But I've heard you talk before about, like, we're just going to kind of just jump into the whole strength training and the calorie counting, because you and I both know that having a calorie centric focus can be very detrimental, especially for women.
Mm.
Having like a scale focus where you get up and you weigh yourself every single day and your day goes according to what that scale says. You're going to have a good day if it says a certain number, and a bad day a certain number. But I've heard you talk, this concept is very interesting to me, and I completely understood it and embraced it when I heard you talk about it. But I think it'll be like a newer concept for a lot of people. But let's talk about like strength training versus cardio. And we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I've heard you talk about how you want to be less. This is such a weird concept to wrap your head around, like be less calorie efficient, I think is how you made it sound, rather than be more calorie efficient with cardio. And I know like this is probably a big deal to start out with on the podcast. I just thought it was so interesting, and it really ties into the whole calorie centric model of like women have been so caught up with cardio. And I would imagine you're around the same age as me. It's like when I was in my 20s and early 30s, like all I wanted to do was cardio. I did some strength training, but I didn't realize the importance of it. But can you please start out with that concept of how like that calorie efficiency thing? Because when I heard you talk about it, I'm like, I wasn't following at first, but then it clicked and I was like, ooh, that's so good.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm glad that you're bringing this up because, and way to wait, just like we're gonna dive right in here. So when talking about this, if our bodies and metabolisms have this range, right? And they have a range of how many calories they can burn, and then it can make itself more efficient or less efficient, as you were just explaining. And your body becomes less efficient with calories. It wastes more energy. It wastes more calories, and you want to be less efficient. When it becomes more efficient, it conserves more calories. It conserves more energy, and it holds on to more calories. And so, when you're thinking about it in terms of cardio, your body recognizes, okay, we're burning a lot of calories here in this moment and during this activity of, running, or whether you're doing some type of training for a marathon or a triathlon, and your body's like, hey, we need endurance here. We don't need a lot of muscle and strength. So your body's like, hey, let's learn how to conserve more calories by paring down your muscle and slowing down the metabolism so that you can become more cardio endurance machine, right? So your body's like, your body goes into this mode. So the more you do running, people are like, I'm going to burn more calories. Your body's like, no, I know what you're doing. I'm recognizing what you're doing. We need a lot of calories here, but we need endurance calories. We need to be able to, give you enough energy to get this throughout this workout. But your body over time recognizes that, and it's actually going to start to slow down how many calories you do burn, because it's conserving more calories and it's slowing down the metabolism.
Interesting to me.
Yeah. I first heard this actually by Sal DiStefano in Mind Pump, which he is an incredible wealth of knowledge. And when he like said this, it clicked in my brain too, as well. Like how it's saying that it clicked for you too. It's like, this just makes total sense. And so then I just wanted to learn more about it. But then when it comes to the strength training world of things, where your workouts are more strength induced, yeah, like here's the perfect example. People are like, oh, I'm not burning a lot of calories through strength training, right? Your body here is like, we need strength, we need muscle. Now your body's in this let's build muscle kind of mode. And we need to be less efficient with calories so that you can build more muscle. And that in turn will allow your body to speed up, your metabolism to speed up, which is going to help in fat loss. And think about it like this too, as well. It's like when you are doing the activity of cardio, you are burning those calories, right? When you are doing, and that's it. It stops in that moment. You're not like, you don't have like people deem it the afterburn effect, but like you don't have that experience with cardio. When you're doing strength training, your muscles are active tissue and they always need fuel to keep them going. And so you could be burning calories even while at rest, while you're sleeping, while you're sitting on the couch, while you're, when you have more muscle mass to your body. So it sounds backwards to me when I first heard it, but if you're training your body one way, which is to be a cardio machine, then your body's like recognizing we need to conserve calories, pare down muscle, slow down metabolism, and make you more of this type of machine. If you want to do strength training, which I think is the most important thing that women can be doing, especially in their later years of life, you may not burn as many calories in the moment. However, your body's requiring strength and muscle. And now your body's like, okay, let's go into this building muscle world. Let's be less efficient with calories so that afterwards, your metabolism speeds up, you're helping to aid in the fat loss, and you're working differently with the calorie way it's used. That makes sense. You stood with me there.
Yeah, I did stick with you. And it's just when I heard it explained, how you explained it, it just like clicked. And I'm like, oh, that is so, and it's true. It's like, I wear an Apple Watch when I'm working out, and I'll do long strength, and it says like 267 calories. And you're like, really? Like, I really feel like I am like sore and tired, and you get a little deterred by that, because then you go for an hour run and it says like 630 calories. You're like, woo.
Yeah.
But yes, you can feel the fatigue. Like, I went to strength training this morning, and I have to go upstairs to wake my son up when I get back. And I was like, my legs are like, I can barely stairs. My legs are so tired, and you just feel it all day, but it's super empowering at the same time. So I think, calories are so stupid, because your body doesn't know here or there, like, oh, I ate 1,800 calories today, or I ate 1,200. Like, it doesn't know. It's just, it needs a certain type of fuel, and it uses fuel in a certain way, depending on what your hormones are signaling. And it's not like it gets to a certain calorie burn and just, you're not hungry anymore, or so it's like, we're so calorie centric, but we really don't need to be. And I wanted to, that's another important topic, like the number one way to speed up your metabolism is through strength training. And a lot of I work with a lot of really sick clients and students who maybe have had type 2 diabetes for 20-30 years. They're on insulin, they have fatty liver, a lot of severe blood sugar dysregulation. And they come to me and they just say, I feel like my metabolism's broken. Like, I do all the things, but I just feel like nothing works for me. And I'll say, are you strength training? And they're like, no. Like, wow. That could be a reason why. So can we talk a little bit more about why strength training is the best way to speed up metabolism? Because I think so many people think, and this, I mean, you can really I don't want to say break your metabolism, but like excessive dieting and diet culture and restricting calories for so many years can definitely alter your metabolism. But a lot of times people think, it's broken, my metabolism's slow, that's just it for me. So can you speak on that a little bit, and how strength training can be so helpful to restore what people might perceive as a broken metabolism?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of people do come in with that mentality of like, my metabolism is broken and my metabolism doesn't work as efficiently as when I was younger. And one thing to say there with the metabolism is that, metabolism may slow down with age, but you also got to consider the fact that like us as humans too can slow down too as well. So it's not entirely the metabolism's fault here. Um, but when it comes to strength training, the ways in which that it helps to aid in the metabolism repair process, first and foremost, is like, let's talk about the calories thing that you just brought up, right? A lot of women that maybe you coach, you've helped, I coach, I help, are coming to us with maybe only having 800 calories a day, which 800 calories a day is the amount that you need to just have like your BMR be, it's just to live, like up to 1,300 calories you could be having just to have sleep, eat, breathe, talk, walk, all the things, sit here and just have a conversation. And then and people are only eating that much. When you introduce strength training, and this is why it's so important to pair it with making sure that you're eating enough food, because if you're introducing strength training with staying at the level of 1,300 calories, then that could just honestly make your metabolism a little less effective to work for you, and may start working against you, because now you're adding on more activity. Then you're not fueling your body with the food that it needs to help internally aid in more like, aid in the process. It's going to make it better. And that's why when women are like, well, I'm strength training and I'm only eating 1,200 calories, it's like, yeah, you're sticking like you're throwing noodles on a wall and they're just falling. They're not sticking, because you're basically you're not feeding yourself enough food to help the process. So when you pair strength training and you pair eating a little bit more food to help aid in the process, this is why people are like, I have so much more energy. My mood is increased. I'm sleeping better. It's because you're giving your internal body the things that it needs in order to heal, which is food. Food is energy. And when you're strength training, you're feeding the energy to the active muscles with your body. And it's a whole, like, without getting entirely sciencey, it's like a whole process that with what happens with the metabolism and what happens with strength training, it's like when you pair those two together, it's like why your mood feels better, why you're sleeping better, why you have more energy, is because you're giving your body more food, and you're giving the strength training aspect of it to fulfill on like the end all be all results that you want, right? So like trying to not get too sciencey here, and I'm catching myself, so people can understand, but strength training helps aid in the metabolism to make it work against you or work with you instead of against you. And it just makes the whole process a little bit smoother when you actually give your body what it needs in terms of getting more muscle on your body, because muscles act to tissue, like I'm saying, and then pairing it with eating more food. They work together to just make the whole thing work better. That makes sense.
Yeah, you need the correct substrates in order to build the muscle, for sure. And we'll talk more about macros in a few minutes, but I'm sure a lot of listeners are sitting here, and a lot of students I work with, they make a lot of changes along the line that I suggest or recommend, and they implement things little by little. But it seems like, especially for women, like strength training always seems to be one of the last things. And I think a lot of it is just, it can be intimidating, or I know I'm the same way. Like if there's something that I don't know how to do in my business, it's like you shy away from it, because you just like, if I know how to do something and I know how to do a task, it's like I'm on it. It's like I'm motivated, I do it. But if it's something that I don't know, so I think a lot of times women just don't know where to start, or it's just like a foreign concept to them, because this women our age and older probably have not been exposed to a lot of strength training. So where would you suggest they start if they're like basically at ground zero? Maybe they're really ill and strength training isn't real, something that they can do a lot of, or maybe they're just like walking a couple of times a week, but they really want to get to starting strength training. What are some things they can do just to get started? Like, what would you recommend there?
Yeah. Um, just to get started out, like I can understand that whole, because I was there too. And regardless of age, I think we all experience some type of intimidation when walking into a gym and then having to walk into a weight room and it's just packed with a bunch of, guys or people that look like they're in shape and you're just not in shape. So it's definitely like a mental barrier to have to break through and to have to develop some self-confidence within yourself to know that like, hey, I have to do this because this is going to make me better as a person, but also my health better for the longevity of my life. So one little tip there is that when I first started my journey, I just wore a hat. So I walked into the gym because I was so nervous and I was so insecure. And I was like, wow, these people look like they know what they're doing. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And like, I really didn't. So I just wore a hat because it acted like a blinder for me. Like, like horses wear blinders. I'm like, nobody can see me. I can't see anybody. I'm just going to stay in my lane. It's like little pro tip there. But if you're just starting out and like, say, even with, New Year's around the corner and you just know that like, if you're very sick or you have these health conditions and you know deep down you have to make a change, yet you don't want to go 0 to 100 and walk into the weight room and do all these strength training exercises, the best thing that you can do for yourself as a beginner is just the resistance of your body weight. Like, let's say you're not even working out. Okay. And like, you just need to start moving your body. One, going for the walks, that's definitely beneficial, but to add a little bit more resistance that your body has never felt before so that you can get a little bit stronger is body weight exercises and doing it maybe like 1 or 2 times a week. And then once you've like stuck to that habit, it's like, okay, 2 weeks later, let's increase in a day, do 3 to 4, right? And then slowly build that up to maybe like a 4-day routine, whatever works for you, or 5-day routine, whatever works for you. But it's like just basic stuff, like doing some air squats in your living room, doing some wall push-ups up against a wall, right? So if you can't do a full push-up, that's definitely the first thing that I would recommend starting if you want to ever get to the goal of doing a push-up. Lean on an incline and just hands on the wall and just push them. That's nice upper body strength right there. Doing some planks, right? Getting down on your knees and just doing some planks. Some little like maybe lateral lunges, things like that, or even picking up some laundry detergent and doing some curls. Okay. So those are some just great little pointers. If you're just starting out, you don't need to go 0 to 100. Start slow because it's the way you're going to be successful. Rather than going to a 0 to 100 and it's going to be like, this is so daunting. And then just keep it consistent and build upon it.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I know people might look at someone like you who's jacked, like and be like, I will never look like that. But you just have to start somewhere, like just get started. And I love all of those things that you can just do at home. Cause I know I go to strength class a couple of times a week just because I work harder when I go to a class and I'm around people. But, when we went through the COVID years and we were having to do home workouts and like I did it at home by myself, but it is just like getting started. That is the hardest part. And it's funny, my 2 teenage boys, we have 3 kids and my younger 2 are teenage boys. They're 18 and 15. And they've always been in sports, but their sports aren't as much strength focused as some of the sports out there. They're, like more speed and agility. But just their body builds, like you would think like boys 15 and 18, like, oh, I'm going to go into the weight room, no big deal. But both of my boys, they're tall and thin. And they're kind of late bloomers. So they don't have a lot of muscle now. Like they're getting it, but even there, they're turned off to strength training because they've been made fun of in the gym. So I'm like, you're not going to get stronger unless you get in the gym, so it's like a catch-22. So it can be intimidating. It can be intimidating for anybody, but those are some great pointers just to get started with. Well, let's transition a little bit into the nutritional part of it, because we can talk all we want about strength training. We can do the strength training, but like, as we were saying before, if you don't have the correct foundations in place through nutrition, it's going to be really hard to build muscle. And some women might be afraid too, like they're just gonna bulk up and get huge, but that's the case. with just, you would have to take in a ton of protein and really be like, do what you did with more of the professional scene. So most women are never going to get to that point, but let's talk a little bit about macronutrients, because I know for my students, they've heard me talk about protein a million times on the podcast, because I do have a protein centric approach, which is a very different from a lot of dietitians. But let's talk about macros and, in particular protein. And I know you focus more on macronutrients and when I should say, like, macros are your protein, fats, and carbs. Some people, sometimes I throw these terms around and people are probably like, what are macros? Rather than calories. But where do you start people with protein intake? And I know it's different for everybody. And when students work with me inside my courses, I help them find like their individual threshold. But what are your thoughts on like overall macronutrients and in particular protein? Like, where do you start people with that?
Yeah, first, I want to just thank you for being a protein centric nutritionist. I can't thank you enough for that, because that's very hard to find with some nutritionists that give, recommendations out to people, especially coming from the nursing background. And I remember being in the ICU and this dietitian was giving an ICU patient a diet. And I was just like, where's the protein? Where's the protein, my friend?
ICU. I know. It's like, how are you going to heal without protein? Yeah. Don't get me started on hospital nutrition.
I know I can probably go down a rabbit hole.
And what they put in tube feedings should be illegal. That's why I don't teach in the conventional system. I'm like, I'm making people sicker. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Okay, but to macronutrients. So first, I love macros. I look at it as like a skill set that will serve you for the rest of your life. I don't look at it as a diet. I don't look at it like, my New Year's resolution is I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to start tracking macronutrients. I'm like, you start tracking macronutrients because you want to learn what type of quality of food you're eating, what is in the food that you're eating, and how about portion size control so that you can, create habits that will be a skill set that can serve you for the rest of your life, after learning. Maybe you are tracking and then you can phase out of that and intuitively eat and understand what food is made up of. But some reasons why macros are that, and then we can dive into the protein aspect and why protein is important. But first of all, macronutrients, if anybody wants to have a more of like focus on fat loss rather than weight loss and dive into like, building a little bit more muscle to be more toned, essentially, the impact of macronutrients it has on the body composition is huge, because if you're tracking your protein, your carbs, and your fats, by understanding those specific roles of what they do for your body, right? Protein is essential for the muscle repair and the growth. Carbohydrates give you energy, and then fats are vital for hormone production. But when you put those three together, that is how you will optimally change your body composition, right? Because fat, like, it's different. Like fat loss and weight loss, different. I could go down that rabbit hole. But then to like maybe do your audience, it will help to, when you're focusing on protein, it helps to, and paired with like, probably your listeners have a little bit of a lower carbohydrate intake because of the sensitivity or resistance that they have to insulin, but it will prevent and manage health conditions, right? So having the right balance of what that individual needs with the protein, fats, and the carbs, it can help, diabetes. It can help, the insulin. It can help heart disease. It can help obesity. It can help everything to just be prevented and managed. And then to the emotional and to like the mental well-being, like that's huge. Like it's not just about like the health and the body composition results, but having the well-balanced nutrition approach and eating those three macronutrients has a profound impact on your mental health, your energy levels, your mood, your cognitive function, just overall better mental well-being. Protein though, and I'm sure your audience too, it's protein is the king of all macronutrients. It's so important, and it's underrated in this industry. Not so many people just don't put enough emphasis on it, or just are undereducated in how important protein is. And I say that because I was one of those too, by the way. Like I said in my story, I was like, I was searching what like, how does that not more well known, first of all? But second of all, yeah. So protein it will help you, first of all, have lesser cravings. If you're eating the adequate amount throughout the day, and I'll share that in a second, what I would recommend somebody to start at. But if you're eating the adequate amount, what your body needs, you'll see that you'll have less cravings throughout the day. You'll feel fuller longer, and it also to help maintain blood sugar levels. So it's like, I always joke, I'm like, if you're eating your protein throughout the day, you won't be that person on the couch at night wanting to eat all of the sweet things and all of the snacks. And because you're hungry because you don't feel satiated throughout the day. And then some things I would recommend for people that are starting when trying to figure out how much protein they should eat, it definitely varies vastly depending on the individual I am talking to. Right. For your audience, if someone is very sick and there's some conditions going on that protein may play as a factor in making some things worse, then maybe we're not going to start out on like what I would recommend the normal human being to start at, like 1 gram of protein per day, per body weight, not per day, 1 gram of protein per day. Damn, that's terrible.
Yeah,
But
we might have some issues with that.
yeah, for sure. No, 1 gram of protein per body weight. And I can even push it up to like 1.2 gram of protein per body weight too, as well, depending on what phase we're in, fat loss, maintenance, X, Y, and Z. But that would be the normal threshold. We could get down, which I'm sure you do this inside of your program. It's like, okay, well, what's your actual lean body mass? Let's talk about that. Then let's talk about the protein. Or like, if somebody's 200 pounds, I'm not going to be like, go eat 200 grams of protein. I'm going to try and maybe bring it down to like 0.8 of what that 0.8 grams per body weight. Or maybe even what a goal body weight may be. And let's start there. But it definitely ranges based off of the individual I'm talking to.
Yeah, we're usually somewhere around like 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, starting around there. And when I work with women, I always like start them at 100 grams of protein a day, because for so many women, that is a huge stretch. Like they're
Yes.
taking in 30, 40 grams all day long. And like you said, wondering why they're hungry, wonder why they're craving, wonder why they're getting blood sugar spikes. But I'm so glad you reinforced so many things that we teach here on the podcast and in my programs. Like, protein is very necessary for blood sugar regulation, keeps you full. Like when I hit that 50 to 60 gram target because I only eat a couple times a day, I am full for 5 to 6 hours. Like I'm not thinking about food. Like if it's only 4 hours and I'm thinking about food and I'm starting to get hungry, I'm like, I don't think I hit my, like I was a little short of protein today, or I didn't get enough fat, one of the two. But typically if I'm hitting that threshold, like you are satiated all day. And so important, the mental aspect, like someday it's going to click with the mainstream how important nutrition is for our mental well-being, and why so much of mental health comes back to what we're eating or not eating. But yes, you reinforced a lot of great things, and why protein is so important and where to start with that. So our audiences are probably a little bit different, but a lot of the people following this podcast do implement intermittent fasting or some sort of time restricted eating, or sometime every once in a while. We don't focus a ton on longer fasts, but some are doing longer fasts just because their insulin resistance is so high and they're really trying to restore that insulin sensitivity, which again starts in the muscle tissue and the liver tissue. But are you ever teaching intermittent fasting concepts, or is that something that, how do I say this correct? Like, how do I want to frame this question? Like, I know it's hard sometimes to work on both building muscle and trying to implement intermittent fasting, because it might be hard to get all the macronutrients. And so with my audience, most of them are eating at least 2 meals a day, more so in like a 5 to 6 hour eating time. It's not like they're doing cramming everything into 2 or 3 hours, but they are trying to restore insulin sensitivity as well. So do you implement any kind of like intermittent fasting or time restricted eating when you're educating your students wanting to build muscle?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
And so I would say yes, under the conditions of exactly what you're all about and everything that you preach and teach and educate your clients on. If somebody has a diagnosis of insulin sensitivity or a medical health condition that intermittent fasting is going to aid in that process, then I am all for implementing, right, intermittent fasting or something that makes sense in a dietary world that's going to help that process. Why I say no is like if somebody's healthy and like we just can focus on building more muscle, which improves insulin sensitivity by itself. It creates better blood sugar regulation by itself, right? Because muscle helps the uptake of glucose from the bloodstream. And it's like a glucose like deposital area too as well. So it's like if that person is healthy and doesn't have these conditions going on, then it's like, well, let's just keep it basic. Let's just go to the basics. Like, let's just eat right. Let's strength train. Let's, do all the things. So that's why I say yes and no. It's like, I totally believe intermittent fasting is 100% a very accurate tool. And definitely deserves the accreditation that it gets for this, like for the world of which you teach.
Yeah, I'm so glad you say that because some people it's a black and white concept for so many. It's like
Yeah.
I hear
I'll
this.
be honest. That's how I first was. I was like, why, like intermittent, like, yeah, I'll be honest. Like it's what makes a good coach is like you readapt and you understand and you educate and you get curious and you learn. It's like, yeah, I was that black and white individual when I first started coaching. I was like, no, it's basics, just strength train and workout. And then you like, you dive into the world of the people that you're working with and getting to know them at a human level and the things that they struggle with. And you're like, okay, well, maybe we're not getting results because of X, Y, and Z. So like, yeah, there definitely has to be, and it's been proven that this works for these individuals. So it's like, yeah, then definitely 100% and be implemented.
Yeah, and so many people just want to say like, what are you doing? What's your fasting protocol? Like I get asked that all the time. Like, well, I know I did have insulin resistance, which is why I got so interested in this. And I couldn't figure
Yeah.
out why it was like I was always thinking about food and having cravings and really hard to maintain my weight, but I have reversed that. And so I'm not in the disease reversal stage anymore. I'm more in a maintenance protocol. I'm not trying to lose weight. If anything, I'm trying to put on a little bit more muscle. So people want to know, and they'll probably ask you all the time too, like, what do you eat? How much protein do you eat? Like, do
All
you
the time.
and it's like, well, this is what works for me. And yes, it will work for a lot of people. But if you are type 2 diabetic on insulin, your protocol is going to be a lot different than somebody who is insulin sensitive and is healthy. So I'm really glad that you had that answer because yeah, it's like so black and white. And I hear from my clients all the time too. It's like, I have Hashimoto's. I was told I can't ever fast, or I was told I can't ever eat until at least noon. It's like they just have these black and white things where it's just such an ultimatum, like this or this. Like, no, we need to look at your personal goals and where you're at now and just kind of move you along into better health.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about strength training in perimenopause and menopause, because I try to say this a lot on my podcast too, like women need more protein as they get older and move from perimenopause into menopause. And a lot of times, especially like I'll look like at my mom as an example. She's 70
Mm.
and never is strength trained. She's actually very ill right now, but it wasn't talked to them. Like they didn't learn any of these concepts. And I think a lot of older women think I'm not as active as I used to be. I don't need as much protein. And so they're kind of skimping on it. But can you talk to us a little bit about why we need more protein as we move through perimenopause and menopause, and why we really just need to start strength training if we haven't already done so.
Yeah, totally. Love this. This is my jam. And I can relate to that. My grandmother took care of her when she was sick. She was a nurse too. And to me, it was crazy. Like she never worked out a day in her life. And she had all this education and understanding. And it just blew my mind that like she didn't eat right. She didn't strength train. She didn't move her body the way it should be moved. So I can relate to that. But do you know Dr. Gabrielle Lyons?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Got her
Okay. So
a couple weeks ago.
me too. I just got it. I can't wait to dive into it. She talks about how muscle is the organ of longevity. So muscle's active tissue, like I already talked on, right? And your body, there's a saying, it's either you use it or you lose it, right? And so like when I said earlier, I'm like, I could look at somebody and be like I know what their life looks like. I could look at my grandmother and be like, dude, I know you didn't work out a day in your life, but it's like there's a stat from the National Institute of Health that your muscle mass decreases approximately 3 to 8% per decade after the age you turn 30. And so what women experience in premenopause or menopause is the risk of osteoporosis because their muscle mass, well, first of all, they don't have most muscle mass, but their bone density is decreasing. And so why eating protein and why strength training is so important is because you're preventing that from happening. So natural process as you age is you have muscle loss. When you have high quality protein, you're eating enough protein throughout the day, then you are able to hold on to your muscle mass. You preserve your muscle mass by doing that. And then as you age too, your metabolism, as we talked about, it slows down. But when you have enough protein, it's key to prevent you, it's key to holding on to weight management, right? So you won't become obese from that. Your muscle mass and your bone density, they can still stay intact. And then bone health. So this is what's really important is when you eat more protein and you strength train, aging affects the bone density, as I just mentioned. And so when you have the vitamin D absorption, when you have the adequate protein coming in from what you're eating on a daily basis, this supports bone strength. And this will help prevent osteoporosis. And women that are perimenopause or menopause, those are the women that I speak to the most. And I always ask them, like, what are you eating on a regular basis? And like we mentioned earlier, it's like they have no protein in their nutrition. And that's the first thing that we just need to start working on with them. But it's so important to incorporate these two aspects as you age. For really, like what I say is there's either two ways you could go, right? You could go down, think about like where you want to be at when you're 70 years old. Do you want to be down the path of not being able to keep up with your kids or your grandkids and like running around with them? Or do you want to be the grandparent that is like not using the walker and being able to run around the backyard with them and create new memories with them? Well, it all matters like right now and how you eat and how you work out and how you take care of yourself when you're 35, even when you're like 25, right? 25, it matters now to the years that you could have later on in life. And that's why it's, I think, so important for people to be educated on this aspect of protein and working out and strength training and incorporating it now sooner rather than later, because it will determine which road you go down later in life.
Absolutely. And so many people don't realize that bone is mostly calcified protein. They just think it's just, oh, I just need vitamin D. I just need calcium. It's like, it's mostly protein. So that is very essential for you to eat. And, not to go down the whole vegan vegetarian path, but I mean, they just don't have as strong bones as those people who eat meat. I mean, that's just the way it is. And yeah, as our estrogen falls, we don't use, as we age, we don't utilize protein as well. It's just so important. And I'm really glad I know this now. I didn't focus on this 10 years ago. But yeah, I feel like women, like our mothers, like women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they're just done such a disservice with their nutrition and their hormones, and a lot of them are paying the price, unfortunately. Couple more questions, but I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit because I've heard you talk about this as well. And you don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but just touch briefly on it. But because I do have some younger listeners, and I shouldn't even say younger because a lot of women are on the pill or some sort of contraceptive that isn't
Mm.
natural throughout their lifetimes. I mean, I know some friends my age in their 40s are still on the pill. And they've been on it for decades. Just that's just what you do. But I've heard you talk a little bit about too how so there's so many things about like oral contraceptives. They're basically, fake hormones and they deplete our nutrients and can cause a lot of issues. But can you speak a little bit about, and of course, we're not judging anybody. We're just putting information out there because I was on the pill for a time in my 20s. And I remember getting pregnant with my daughter took 8 months because I was coming off of oral contraceptives. And my son was not even 2 months because I just thought it was going to take like, a while for our second child. All of a sudden, boom, like my first two kids aren't even 2 years apart because I just figured it was going to take longer than it did. But how are oral contraceptives, again, no judgment, but just putting information out there. How is that coming into play with like body composition? Because I've heard you talk about this a little bit, like how does that play a role? Because I think so many women are just popping these synthetic hormones without thinking about it, because that's what they've been told to do. They're trying to protect themselves from getting pregnant, but they don't really they're not giving full disclosure about the side effects.
Totally. Yeah, I think I went off on a podcast with a macro hour in this one. I remember it vaguely. I just had a rant during that podcast, but it's exactly what you just said and what I've said and shared in the podcast too as well. It's like it's fake hormones. And like there was a couple of things that came up while you were sharing it because there's a couple very close people in my life that recently got on this, and I've just seen like a negative effect in the overall body composition of weight gain and, mood and just overall stamina of the human itself. And again, not judging, but just speaking to, and my stepmom too, was on this type of regime for her whole, basically from when she got her period to when she tried to have kids. And she had a really hard time having my sister, and had to go through IVF. So what that it's like you're basically giving your body fake hormones, and your body is trying to regulate to those fake hormones with your own system. And you know what's so funny is because I think I popped off with this podcast because I had to take birth control for the first time because I just went through my egg freezing journey. And I literally had a 10-minute debate with myself in the kitchen of like, I cannot believe I'm about to put this thing down my throat because I feel so many ways about it. And again, this is like my personal opinion on it. Like, I don't want anybody to take it any differently. This is just personal opinion, personal experience, personal education that I've had around this concept. But it can make it really hard in terms of like, I think I was only on it for 7 days. So, and it was a process that I had to do for egg freezing. But the fourth day of taking it, I remember that I think I cried every 5 minutes. And like anything or anything that was said or done or like communicated or like I was experiencing that day, I was just like so hormonal. And it was the whole internal, everything was just shifting inside. And that's exactly, and then so to go with the body weight, that's what, like, I'm seeing somebody in my life just put on weight from, now I know it's like a mixture of the way you eat and the way you live your lifestyle, but your hormones are shifting internally and they're shifting like out of alignment. They're shifting on like not in a normal way. They're basically, you're basically telling a natural process to stop happening. And that to me, like, that's just, that just like rocks my brain of like why people would want to do this rather than just like, taking, either figuring out alternative ways of doing it rather than messing up your internal system, because it damages, it goes against weight gain, or weight gain happens. And then it makes things just harder in terms of results to get when you're trying to lose weight or trying to achieve a look because of all of the internal things that are changing. And then it can make it just harder if you want to have kids later on in life. So yeah, there's so many things that I feel about this. I'm trying to watch my words on what I do say though, to be honest.
I know, I know. And then like we said, it's just purely information, but there are
Yeah.
so many young girls who are put on oral contraceptive, some sort, or some other contraceptive so early, like they have painful
Yeah.
period, acne, they are moody, whatever it is, and right away. And I think I have heard it's like 24 cycles that it takes before your body is really just kind of into that whole process. So if you're stopping it within that time frame, like your body really just doesn't ever have time to get a regular cycle established. So just
Yeah.
putting information.
Educate yourself on it before taking it.
Yes, because a lot of, if you're going to a conventional doctor, they're not going to educate you on this, and chances are they're not educating because they don't know any better, and it's just what they've been taught to do. Like, you diagnose and you treat with a pharmaceutical. So,
Yes.
well, in closing, we're in the holiday time of year, but what is your favorite? So answer this and then tell us where we can find you and find your information and work with you also. But what is your favorite tip for somebody to get back on track if they've fallen off the wagon, after the holiday season? I know you talk a lot about mindset as well, and we didn't even have time to touch on that today, but what would be your kind of number one tip to get back on track for those who may be listening to this a few weeks later
Yeah.
and like they've fallen off the rails?
Yes. Keep in mind that this is one day and you return to reality the next day. So holidays are think about it like a temporary break in routine and not a permanent change. So I think it's really important that you have memories over nutrition on the day, you enjoy yourself, you be present, you create new memories, you allow yourself to have things that you want, you don't restrict anything, but then it's you pick right back up the next day. It's important to return to regular exercise, to eating right, to the goals that you're striving to accomplish immediately following the holiday.
That's exactly what I tell people. It's one meal, it's one day. That's all.
That's it.
Not
That's
a
it.
weekend. It's not a
Yeah.
week. It's not
Yeah.
a month. It's not 3 months. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, it's been wonderful speaking with you. Tell us where we can find you, follow you, find your information, and work with you further.
Yeah, you can check out WarriorBabe.com if you're interested in any one-on-one coaching, or follow me on @Nikkiey Stott or @WarriorBabe on Instagram. And then also the Macro Hour podcast on Apple and Spotify.
Awesome. I've started listening to that and I really, really like it. So, well, it's been a delightful conversation. We appreciate all your knowledge and reinforcement, and heading into the new year, we're gonna get down to that strength training and make it a very
Let's go.
vital, important part of our life. So thanks so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.